be a skula, Yeshua for all those who need it, and both personally, nationally, and our community, everything.
Amen.
We're going to do Drush Aleph. It's a little bit on it doesn't necessarily follow the, short.
This is Parshat Tetzaveh, yeah?
Parshat Tetzaveh, excuse me.
Purim Kotzed, everyone.
Purim
Purim
Kotzed,
Sameach.
that's right.
Thank you so much.
Actually, no, we'll start with, we'll do Drush Aleph. If we can get through Aleph, then we'll try to do another one. We'll do another one that's a little shorter.
What page in this sefer?
That's a good question. Let me see. Drush Aleph is page Taf Ayin Vav.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. It's a little on the longer side, but it's actually very cool. It's something unique that we never thought of before, but that's like the MO of the Zera Shimshon in general, is that he comes up with some new chidushim that we never expected, about things that we kind of looked at many times and probably didn't think. Drush Aleph of the Zera Shimshon.
Tetzaveh.
Parshat Tetzaveh, the last week of Shovavim Tat. Okay, Bezrat Hashem, which will be the beginning of a new challenge in our focus. The program tonight, we begin to start seeing that we're now focused. Of the last couple of months, which have not been have been the opposite of now focus. So let's see if we can turn it around. So it says here like this. The first thing we're going to do is we have to, in order to understand the Zera Shimshon, we have to look at what happened at the end of last week's Parshat. And the end of last week's Parshat. Like this. So last week's Parshat ends with Truma. Parshat Truma ends with the last word of Parshat Truma is.
Last word of Parshat Truma. You think I know the Chumash by heart?
So I don't think you know it by heart. But
does it say Gol Mevilna on my forehead?
It says V'chol Yidin Utav, V'chol Yidin
Utav.
It says the last word of last week's Parsha is Nechoshet.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם בורא בבשמים.
So the last week's Parsha ends with Nechoshet, which is obviously talking about the Mizbeach Nechoshet. And in order for us to, the Zera Shimshon is trying to understand what he says here. Dashinan Shapir Smichut Parsha. We have to understand the juxtaposition, meaning the connection between last week's Parsha and this week's Parsha. So he says here, if we look at the last word, the Choshet, we can already start understanding what the connection of this week's Parsha is, and even next week's Parsha, actually. So look what it says here. Shiroshet Tevot Nechoshet Ner Chodesh Shkalim Tireh. So he says by suggesting that the word Nechoshet is actually Roshet Tevot of Ner, which is we'll get to it in a second, but it's Ner, like just the menorah. Chodesh is the Kedusha Chodesh. Shkalim is the Machatzita Shekel, which is next week's Parsha, and Tireh is you will see. And then the next words right after the word Nechoshet is V'atat Tetzaveh. So now he says, V'hem shlosha dvarim shenitkashem Moshe behem Lifi ma shekatav Rashi bePerushus HaChumash. We look at Rashi in Bamidbar and in Shmot, in both Kiddush HaChodesh and the next week's Parsha in Kitisa, Machatzita Shekel next week, and in this week, and in Bamidbar, with every one of them, the Ner, which is the menorah, the Chodesh, which is Kiddush HaChodesh, and Shkalim, which is the Machatzita Shekel. Those are the three things. So he said, the question is, why? Vayem b're'em u'b'chidush ha'gadosh b'harsha, perik tz'akomet, לפי שפרשה זו לא נזכר בשם משה, נראה לומר שלושה דברים נתקשה משה בהם לא היה קושי מצד עצמם, וכמה דברים יותר חמורים מאלו היו מיד. אלא הקושי היה מפני שהיו נותנים לו רמז על מיתתו חוץ לארץ. So he says, if we look in the Re'em, the Rav Eliyahu Mizrahi, and the Maharsha, we'll see that he mentions that these three things, and we know that these three things, so the Kiddush HaChodesh, when you look at the Rashi on Kiddush HaChodesh, he says, I don't understand. The moon gets bigger, gets smaller, whatever it is, and he says, and Hashem tells him, Kazeh Re'u Kadesh. He says, look here, look at the moon, and I'll explain to you what you mean. Same thing with next week, what happens with the Parsha with the Machatzita Shekel. He says, what do you mean Machatzita Shekel? And it says, Rashi there says also, he shows him a shekel of fire. What happens with the menorah? Same thing. Moshe has a problem with the menorah. Thank you so much. So he has a problem with the
Good,
menorah.
Narba.
Thank you. He has a problem with the menorah. So it's the same thing. Hashem says, what do? Put the gold into the fire. And what happens? Miraculously, what happens?
With what? With the menorah?
Yeah. Hashem tells him, throw the gold into the fire.
The menorah came out?
The menorah comes out.
Really?
3 things that have to do with Hashem saying Moshe has problems. So the question is, I don't get it. He said, Zera Shimshon says, it's all nice and good. It says that this week's Parshat, we know that this week's Parshat Tetzaveh, we know.
Whoa, what's that? It's mozolot or hamotzi?
I would assume
Hamotzi.
No, so it looks like, yeah.
Wow.
So he says here.
Wow, thank you.
So it says here that Moshe had difficulty with these 3 things, but we should be asking a simpler question. They're much more difficult things that Moshe didn't have quite problems with, but only these 3 things he did have problems with.
The menorah, machzit shekel, and what?
Kiddush HaChodesh.
Chodesh.
And yeah, if we go to Kiddush HaChodesh, let's just go just for an example so you'll understand what I'm saying. If we go to Parshat Bo Perak Yud Bet, Pasuk. Pasuk, sorry. Yes, Pasuk, I believe it. Says here, Pasuk Bet, it says, Chodesh hazeh lachem rosh kodashim. And that's from there we learn about Kiddush HaChodesh. And it says, Rashi says there, Hereu levana b'chidusha. Hashem showed Moshe the moon as it was getting new. And he says, V'amarlo she'areach mitchadesh yilach rosh chodesh. When the moon is getting new, have a new Rosh Chodesh. Ve'en mikra yotzei b'shuto al Chodesh Nisan. Right? And then he says, what does he say later? And he says, Hazeh, and then on the word Hazeh, Rashi says, Nitkashem Moshe al molad al-Lebanon. Rashi says Moshe had a problem with understanding molad, the whole idea of molad. Okay, and what does it say there? And he says, Heralo ba'etzma, Hashem showed him with his finger, Kivyachol, et ha-levana berakia v'amarlo, Hazeh ba'ev v'kadesh. He says, here, this is what you have to do.
When you see it small like
When you see it
this.
small, this is what you have to do. Okay, so that's the first one. That's in Parshat Bo. Then if we go to next week's Parsha, which is the Machatzita Shekel. Machatzita Shekel. It says here. Sorry, we're flipping pages here, just to explain the point. And he says here. Rashi says. Says here, where am I? Here. So it says here, Ze Yitnu, that's in the third Pasuk Gimel of Parshat Kitisa. It says, Heralo Kimin Matbea Shelesh. It says he showed him a matbea of fire, right? Mishkala Machatzita Shekel, it's half a shekel. And if you look at the menorah, which is, and later in the menorah, we also know that he in. Okay, so then the menorah also, he had a problem with that as well. Okay, so now he says, why is it that those 3 things don't seem to be that difficult that Moshe should have such a challenge with it?
Yeah, just take it out of there.
It's all good. It's all good. But Jush Aleph. So he says the question is why did Moshe have such a hard time with this? So. The Zera Shimshon already starts saying is that these 3 things hinted to.
The Moshe would not come into Israel?
Yes. That's what Zera Shimshon says. That's his opening statement. His bold statement of the thing is that these 3 things are why did he have such difficulty with them? Is because they represent his challenge of going into Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and now he gave him now the Zera Shimshon explains. He says. Why? First, we have to explain why these 3 things, and why we need to remind. Why does Hashem have to remind them 3 times? Okay, so he says here, "V'nitan lo remez zeh shalosh pamim, lefi shegam hu b'shlosha dvarim ya'na mimenu knisat haaretz." He says that this was indicated to him 3 times. That is, Moshe was told 3 times because there were 3 things that prevented Moshe from going into Eretz Yisrael. And if we look in the Zohar on Parshat Breshit. The first time, what is the first thing that what was the first time that Moshe was prevented from going into Eretz Yisrael? When he challenged Hashem and he said what? Shlach na b'yat tishlach. He was a little bit mechutzaf to Hashem.
When Hashem told him to go, he said, you send somebody
Right,
else?
exactly.
That's the first
That's
time?
the first time.
I thought it was only they hit the rock.
No. So then he says the second time, Hasheni, Lama Re'ota. The second time is when Bnei Yisrael are suffering. When Bnei Yisrael are suffering, what does he say? Why are you making it worse for them? Right? Lama Re'ota, that's the second time. And the third time, Shekibel Ha'erev Rav v'gamur Yisrael asot ha'egel.
So it's not even the one of
the
the...
rock, which is interesting.
Wow.
Right? So he says here basically that there were 3 times to remind Moshe. Hashem tells Moshe there are 3 times I'm going to give you 3 signs that you're not going to inherit Israel, and those 3 signs are not the ones that you and I would have thought. For at least 2 of them are not the ones that we would have thought. The first one we would have thought, as you said, is hitting the rock.
That's the famous one.
That's what we all think, right?
So everybody...
But the Zohar says not. The Zohar does not say that. The Zohar says, "Yishlach nabiat yishlach, lama riota," and the third one is when when Moshe accepted or brought in the Erev Rav. According to this, the Erev Rav is the one who brought in next week's Parshat, the Chet HaEgel. Okay, and therefore, what happens with the Chet HaEgel? What happens? The Yetzer Hara comes back after at Matan Torah. It was removed.
In other words, if you want to come to Eretz Yisrael, you have to be with the Erev Rav.
Right.
You have to not say why are we getting the Arabs hitting us? Don't say that too much. And 3 3 is do your shlichus.
Exactly. But here, look what he says here. It says, so he says here, look exactly what you're saying. What was the next? What was you saying? Memiriva, which is hitting the rock, right?
That's the famous one.
Right. Look what he says. Right? He says inyan acher.
This was the stamp.
Right. Exactly. He says so he says is we all ask the same question. Meimei Riva. That's the one we all think of. So we're all right that Meimei Riva is indeed what caused Moshe not to go into Eretz Yisrael. But it's unlike the other 3 where we could have said is maybe those 3 Moshe could have undone, quote unquote. That's why he says lachem. But in the words there, it says lachem. Hashem says to Moshe lachem.
In other words, the other stuff you could have still done.
Right, you could have asked for forgiveness and davening.
But that's
here,
it.
Once you say lachem, it's a lashon shvuah. Once you say lachem, then Hashem says that's it. No more, no chance. Okay. So therefore, emerges a basic. What happens is that as a punishment for these 3 things, these 3 sins, the 3 sins again are shlach nabiat yishlach, where he basically challenges Hashem, saying is, Hashem says you're going to go to save Bnei Israel. And then Moshe says, I'm not the one who's doing it. Hashem says, go do it. Moshe goes back and says, I don't want to do it. That's the first one. Why have you done evil? Why have you done? Make it worse for us than we could have done it. Than it was already. And the third one was when he accepted the Erev Rav.
What's the connection between the Lama Erota to the menorah?
We haven't gone there yet.
You didn't get there yet.
We're going to get there. So now he explains the 3 mitzvot that Moshe could not comprehend. Like you said, the 3 mitzvot that we couldn't understand, which are Ner, Chodesh, Sheker. Those are the 3 ones that he couldn't understand. And those are the 3 that, how those connected to what we just mentioned. Right? So now, like al panav, as they say, from the, just from looking at it from at a glance, we could say is that those 3 times, the 3 times that he sinned, Moshe sinned 3 times, so Hashem wanted to go show him 3 different mitzvot that in some way correspond to them. There's got to be connection, like you said. So we're going to figure it out. So he says like this. Your question, Zera gives you the answer. So he says, first, we have the question. Moshe, what did he have? The first question. What was the first challenge he didn't know how to do? First mitzvah.
Kiddush Levana.
Kiddush HaChodesh. Right. Shehi remes l'malchutan shel Yisrael. Right. It's an allusion. Right. It's a remes to the success of Bnei Yisrael. Right. V'hu neged shlach na b'libiat tishlach. And it corresponds to Moshe saying, send whoever you want, right? In other words, whoever you tell me to send, you just send whoever you want. That's basically kind of saying. Right? So he says is that statement, Moshe declined to be the one who was willing to bring him in. Because he said, so just send whoever you want.
So that's why he didn't understand Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana is the Malchut, and you don't want to be you don't want to go and do the Malchut.
So you weren't willing to accept it, so you're not willing to be the Shaliach. So he says that's the first one. Step 1. Next one, Odid Kasha Menorah, the menorah. He had a problem with the menorah. I forgot anything last week's Parsha. I believe it's last week's Parsha. He says what? In the menorah, he says, it's this big miksha achat. He just says, I don't get it. I can't do that. It's impossible. How do you do that? So he says, Hashem tells him, I think Rashi says it there. Rashi says, Hashem told him to throw the piece of gold into the fire, and out comes a menorah. Okay, so what do we have here? So he says, Od kasha menorah, v'hu neged lama hariota. Why is that? Vod bashkalim, he says here.
He only explains about the yarech here.
Hold on, he's not done. He's giving you he's giving you the goteret, and then he's going to go into breaking news. He's giving you the headlines, and then he's going to go. He also had difficulty regarding menorah, and that corresponds to lama hariota and bashkalim. And with regards to the half a shekel, it says neged. It's corresponding to the erev rav. Okay. Now he says v'zei bi'uram. Now this is the explanation. Okay. First, we have to explain what it means kiddush hachodesh. Davar barur shalavana mitmal'et u'mtchaseret v'hu digmat eretz Yisrael. We know what happens to the moon. It starts small, gets big, and then starts small, and it gets small again. Right? What they call in English waxes and wanes. Right? It gets small, big, whatever. Right? And he says this is a dugma. This is symbolic of Eretz Yisrael. Shemishulal tzvi is compared to a tzvi. What happened? What does the Gemara?
Skin of a deer.
Well, exactly. What does the Gemara say? Exactly. Very good.
It's like a deer. You could stretch it.
Right. The skin automatically. Exactly. Right. The skin is not large enough to accommodate all the flesh that's in the tzvi. So too, when the people of Eretz Yisrael are sitting there, Revacha expands. And Yoshvim Alea, Gamda contracts. Right. We can understand that today too. I'm not going to get into politics, right? When the people Bnei Israel are sitting there, what happens? We have plenty of room. We can't build it fast enough, right?
You get the Arabs out, we'll have more room.
No, I'm not. Like I said, I'm not getting involved. Okay. So he says here, "Ukeneged Tetzaveh Yamim Rishon Shalvana, Hayu Tetzaveh Dorot Me'Avraham Shlomo, She'az Kan Yasiyara B'Yishlumuta, Kideita B'Zohar." He says, corresponding to the first 15 days of the moon. Those correspond to the 15 generations from Abraham till Shlomo. And what happens from Abraham to Shlomo? What happens to the Bnei Israel? It only gets over between Abraham and Shlomo. What happened? Bnei Israel expand. They expand. They come into Eretz Yisrael. The Malchut happens, etc., etc. As it says in the Zohar. Keneged Tetzaveh Yamim Hachronim Shehi Pguma. What happens with the 15th day of the month? It starts waning.
Smaller.
It starts getting small. hu tedvav dorot mirechavam ad tzidkiyahu shesimani b'ruchanat zeretanav dugma d'alvana שמתחשבת. Okay? וכהי דאמרינא בילקוט דברי ימים אם זכיתם לבנה אתם מונים למילואה של לבנה בכתיב החודש הזה לכם אברהם יצחק ויעקב יהודה פרץ נמלה ואתם מונים בגימתה רחבה מביאה שיער עיין שם. So if you look at the Yalkut Divrei Hayamim, which is the base of the Yalkut Shimoni, he says that if you look, it says there, if you're married, then you'll be able to count the 15 full days from the Aleph to Tedvav. Avram, Yitzchak, the 15 generations from Avram to Shlomo. If you don't merit, what's going to happen? You're going to count the 15 not so good days. You're going to count basically.
But the Kiddush Lavana we can only do in the first 15 days.
Right, but he's getting there. Second. Okay? In the above, we can understand that why Moshe found difficulty there. Why? If Moshe machnisan Eretz Yisrael la'aretz, לעולם היו יושבים עליה תמיד שהיה נותאם שם. כנודע, תמיד הייתה ממשלה בישראל, ולא היה נחרב בבית, והייתה לבנה ממועה. לכן שאמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא בחודש שלכם, דמשמע לשון חידוש, חידוש א'. הלבנה מתחדשת, נתקשה משה. Moshe realized that the renewal, the moon, the Kiddush HaChodesh, is symbolic of what? The renewal of Jewish monarchy. But he couldn't understand why it was possible for the Jewish people to experience renewal once he would bring them to Eretz Yisrael. He said, what's the problem? I don't get it. If the moon gets bigger and smaller, I don't understand the small part. I can't get it. I don't grasp the small part. I'm only thinking about.
So that's why I can't bring them.
If I can't bring them, right? In other words, he's saying is I don't get it.
Because Moshe Rabbeinu, if he came, there wouldn't be the small part.
Exactly, there wouldn't be the small part. So Moshe Rabbeinu nitkasha.
Nice.
With
Kiddush Lavana.
With Kiddush Lavana, because he says I don't get the small part. I can't get it. Lo mivin, right? It doesn't get. I don't chop it, right? Right.
The sad part.
Exactly. ואז הראה לו הקדוש ברוך הוא שישראל יגלו מאדמתם, והוא לא יכניסם לארץ, דהיינו שלא יהיה מביא להם המלך So he says this is why Hashem showed him, explained to him what? To explain to him that unfortunately, Moshe, why are you having such a difficulty with a relatively easy mitzvah, which is Kiddush HaChodesh? Because unfortunately, you're not going to be bringing them to Eretz Yisrael, because I want to show you what's going to actually happen. The Galut, right? And that's why you're having a challenge. You're having a challenge because you can't see beyond the positive side, the 15 first days, right? You can't see beyond that, right? But what happens after the 15 not so good days? The next 15 good days, right? So Hashem is trying to tell him that it's a circle, right? But Moshe could only see the 15 good days. He couldn't see the next part, or he wasn't willing to comprehend it. That's start. Okay, we just did Kiddush.
Well, I think we all don't understand
Well,
why
we understand, of course.
why we have to have the bad side, the
Exactly.
Galut,
Right, but we also
Galut Ishmael.
Right.
We don't understand why we have to go through this.
We don't understand.
We're
but
all
also
B'chinat Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right, but what else? What else though?
What?
Else? We also, even within the bad, what happens? Sometimes you see little lights of good, right? Even in the bad stuff, sometimes you see those little lights of good, but sometimes it's hard for us. It's even harder, right? We have that difficulty because we're so focused on that in that moment that it's like bad, quote unquote, whatever that means, that we can't really take a second and say, wait a minute, maybe there's a really good thing coming, right? So that's step one. That's the moon, Kiddush HaChodesh.
What's the issue doing that he had?
So the question is like this: there are three things. If you look at the last,
The Gemara. I literally happen to have just learned this Gemara.
okay.
So
So there are three things that Moshe had challenges with.
yeah.
Right? And if it's and Zera Shimshon says it's Ramuz in the last week, the last word of last week's parsha, Nechoshet.
Right.
Okay, so he says Ner, Chodesh, Shekel, Tireh.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hashem
so
showed him. Yeah.
Right, you'll see those three
Famous part,
things.
yeah.
Right, those three things are the ones that he had challenges with.
Right.
So the first one is if we just said Kiddush HaChodesh. Okay, now we're going to go to Ner,
But
Menorah.
what was his issue with Kiddush HaKodesh? I just why after that?
Well, he said so. Kiddush HaChodesh. The reason why Kiddush HaChodesh is such a challenge is because Kiddush HaChodesh represents basically, according to Moshe, at least it looks. He's basically Moshe couldn't comprehend the fact that the moon waxes and wanes. He doesn't understand that. He couldn't grasp that. It means that there's good stuff, but he couldn't understand that there's also less good stuff at the end on the other side. So Moshe was only looking at, and that was representative also of same thing with Eretz Yisrael. He says that's representative of Eretz Yisrael. But the Zera Shimshon is trying to do is basically saying that these three things that Moshe had challenges with are symbolic of why Moshe had. These three things are also hints to why Moshe couldn't go into Eretz Yisrael. Not the hitting the rock, which is the famous reason. Hitting the rock was like the, as they say,
Final.
That was the makeba patish, right? It's the last thing,
literally,
okay? Right, literally here. Okay. Now he says, b'tzivui menorah. Okay, regarding the mitzvah of the menorah.
Someone added in the tough obstacles reinforce our importance and why we need to fight the war for what is right.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
Instagram.
Okay.
What? What was that?
Comments?
The
Live comments?
top three
Thank you
things.
both.
What does he say?
The tough obstacles reinforce our importance and why we need to fight for what is right.
We have to fight for what is right because of these obstacles are. Why do we have to fight for what is right? Maybe ask him to clarify.
Please clarify.
Okay, so he says, now we have the next one is, we just did the chet of Nechoshet, now we're going to do the nun, the ner. The tzivui menorah, regarding the mitzvah of menorah, it says, te aseh, ktiv te aseh b'yud, right, with the yud. To look at the cheteva right there, that's not what it says it's nowhere else.
In the whole Torah, we don't have a yud after
Exactly.
taseh.
Right, exactly, we have ta'aseh, but we never have a yud after a taf, like te
Te.
aseh,
Yeah.
right, we never have that. V'amru
Say that
b'midrash,
again?
if you look at the word and when you talk about the menorah in last week's parsha, it says teaseh, right? It says here 25 cafe. It says here cafe 31. So it says here 31. It says here. Vasita menorah zahav tahor miksha teaseh. Teaseh is spelled Taf Yud Ayin Samech Ayin.
The only place in the
Sin,
Torah where you
Hey.
have a yud here.
Right, there's
Normally
never,
there's never a
the
yud
word
after the
te'aseh, the word te'aseh doesn't appear
Means
anywhere
to do.
else.
Ta'aseh, to do.
Right.
Normally you don't have a yud after the tav. It's the
Does it
only
make
place
you
in the
feel
whole
like
Torah
you
where
get-
it has a
That's
yud
what I'm
after the
saying. So
tav.
that's-
When it's
right.
talking about the golden menorah.
Right. So then it says te'aseh. It says here. So he basically says
Lashon
te'aseh.
acid?
What?
Does it make it Lashon acid?
It makes it te'aseh. It should be made. It's almost like it should be made. Okay. And the Chachamim there say shehu remez la'eser menorot te'aser milashon like yud. The yud there is representative of the
Oh,
set,
10.
the 10. right? The lashon that Shlomo, that Shlomo made what? Well, how many menorahs did
10.
Shlomo make? 10.
So this yud is the remez to do 10. But what about the 11th one, the Moshe Rabbeinu?
Hold on, we're getting there. 1 second. Vashachna tan kama lama Shlomo asa es.
And so you know what to say now. Oh, we're getting there.
Yes or no? Why did this is a great one. You're gonna love this part. Why did Shlomo Melech make 10 menorahs? So it's the Shach. It said the Sifrei Kohen says. He says here what? He says, "V'mishkan lo asa ela echad." What happened? Shlomo makes 10, and Mishkan, like you said, Moshe makes only 1. Right? So he says here, "You call amot kufim tachtav sheshlomo malach al hayunim v'al hatachtonim." Okay, so he says what? Mishum hachi asar es menorot kula mishiva nirot. Every one of the menorahs had how many?
7.
7 times 10.
70 nations.
70 nations.
Nice.
How many amim did Shlomo Melech rule?
Olechu machsir, like Beit Shammai.
Yeah. How many did he rule over? How many nations?
70 nations.
He ruled over 70 nations. Very good. Shlomo Melech.
Shiva Mammon, that's
Right. Mishum hachi lo asu el but aval bamidbar lo ayu tzruchim el lachnia el shiva amud amamim shayu be'eretz Yisrael. What happens with how many nations did Moshe?
1.
They only have to do 7.
Right.
That's why he only made 1.
You hear that?
It's a great Torah.
Nice Chiddush.
You're right. It's a nice Kiddush, right? Mishum hachi lo asu el menorachat ad kan. That's the Shach says.
Wow.
The Shach says we have 10 from Shlomo Melech. Keneged 70, 7 times 10. 7 kanim, 7 lamps or 7 arms times 10 menorahs is 70, because Shlomo Melech has to control and rule over 70 nations. How many nations did Moshe have to rule over? Only the 7 of Eretz Yisrael. Ukshera Moshe. What happened when Moshe said, Hashem, you're only making me want to do 1. You're only commanding me to do 1. I don't get it. Lo Evin. He didn't understand. He said, wait a minute, I need 10. I need to do it to do what? To be machnia all the 70 nations. Right? ומתחילה צריך להחליש כוח 7 אמות. ואחר כך יבוא יהושע וימית הלם אל מלאכות ומהאל לשון קשה כדכתיב ואת אלי הארץ לקח, ואחר כך יבוא שלמה ויחליש 70 אמות. ואם לא היה משה אומר למה הריותה, היה רואה מלחמת לאחים. We learned that a couple of weeks ago when it says lama hariota, it says, the Midrash there says, he says is that you're going to see, you're not going to go in. You're not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, but Yeshua is going to conquer the Lam Aleph Malachim. So he basically saying is, "Aya ro'eh melchemet Lam Malachim, etecha היה מכניע כל 70 אמות, ואז היה יכול לעשות בה מבאר שמונות, לפי שכל התיקון היה בא כאחד, בשביל זכותו שהיה איש אחד." So basically he's saying is that basically Moshe had a difficulty as from Hashem saying Lama Hariota, why are you making it worse? Right? That's what it literally means, Lama Hariota. And Hashem says, wait a minute, because Lama Hariota, you won't be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. So reason number 2 is Keneged the menorah. What's the menorah? You have 7 panim, 7 arms. So Moshe says, I don't get it. Why do I only have to build 1 menorah which has 7 arms? Shouldn't I be building 70? Like 10 menorahs with 7 arms? Hashem says, no. You're not going to, because you said Lama Hariota, you're only going to get to see what? You only have to be Lachnia, the 7 Amim, the 7 nations to get
What was Lama Herota? In which context was it there?
Lama Hariota is Moshe telling to Hashem, Bnei Israel, Hashem tells, it's the last Parshat of
The beginning. The first Makot, the beginning.
The first Makot, he said, right before the first Makot, Hashem says to Moshe,
by the snare.
Right.
When Paro gave us to add the kash, to go get the kash, the tevin.
Oh, right at the end of Shmos.
It's at the end of Shemot. Hashem
After he's
said,
already talking to Paro.
right, exactly.
But he hasn't yet done the Maccabee done between him and the...
Right, so what happens is Moshe goes to Paro, and Hashem tells Moshe, go to Paro and tell him to get out, tell Bnei Israel, tell him to leave Bnei Israel, get Bnei Israel out. Moshe says, no problem, I'm going. And as soon as Moshe goes, it says, it says, send out the nation. What does that Paro say? Oh, you want to send the nation out? No problem, I'll make it worse for them. And Hashem, and then Moshe says, it's the last Aliyah of Shemot, I believe. It's not
complains.
And he says, why'd you make it worse? You just told me to go.
So he complains to Hashem.
So he complains to Hashem? Exactly. So he says, You complaining? Here's a complaint.
So the punishment of the three.
Can I
Trying to throw it all
repeat
together.
what our friend said?
Please.
He said the tough obstacles we involve. This is what he said. If one asks why are these hard obstacles happening, you may feign splice in knowing that the struggle in itself comes with an opportunity for growth. Sorry, solace in knowing that the struggle itself comes with an opportunity for growth.
All right, Baruch Hashem. Good. Okay, good.
So that fits.
Yeah, makes sense. You say basically we have to understand that sometimes when we have the difficult time, we have to look through the difficult time and understand that sometimes the difficult time is the challenge of the challenge is not the difficulty itself, but it's also understanding that through that difficulty comes a little bit of comfort knowing that through that emerges an opportunity or something positive out of it. We just have to be willing and strong enough, both in our emunah and in our knowing ourselves, that we can emerge stronger as opposed to just saying, this and asking Hashem why.
You could also say that the negative happened. I don't know if this is going to connect at all, but we'll try. That the negative happening has nothing to do with you. It's for the other person to help you.
Correct.
So, and we could learn this. We could learn this from Moshe. That why didn't Hashem speak to him? So, and you can learn from that Hashem wants us, and you also kind of see it in the menorah.
Right.
Like the reason why we're here, the reason why that we have to deal with all of these issues, is because if we did not have to deal with these issues, then we couldn't act like God.
Right.
We couldn't be a piece of God. We couldn't help correct things, and make differences.
Correct. Very good. So now he says here. Okay. Now we have. We just did the menorah.
It's the blood.
We did we could do chodesh. What's left?
You did Chodesh the menorah, now you have Nishra.
Shekel. Very good. Okay. So now he explains why did Moshe have a difficulty with the Machatzit Shekel, which happens to be next week's Parshat, Kitisa, right? And how does this correspond to the Erev Rav, which is what we said before, right?
Over here.
And now he says, and which is it, right? Now he says like this.
Lama Rasa Neged Erev.
Right, exactly. So now he says like this. Okay. So he says, Av Sheshama Moshe, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Tziva Alav Al Machatzit Shekel. Similarly, when Moshe heard that Hashem tells him only on half a shekel, like I said, it's next week's parsha, right? Which indicates what? That the world is not complete, and that Hashem's name is not complete. Just like a half shekel, is it complete? Ukshalo, right? Hashem, it was difficult for Moshe to understand. Right? What happens when Moshe comes into Eretz Yisrael? We know the Midrash. What happens? The world is going to be perfect, right?
But Mikdash will never be destroyed.
Exactly. That's what Rashi says. כלומר שהוא לא הכניסם לארץ ישראל, שכתב השח, ששקל באקבש כמטריה כ"ו. Wow, okay. I'm getting into Akbash. So the Shach says, with the Mechatzita shekel, he says that the shekel, the word shekel, in Akbash, the word shekel in Gematria of Akbash.
You know what Akbash is?
Yeah, Aleph corresponds to Tav, Bet covers with Shin, etc., etc. So he says here, if we look at shekel, Shin becomes a Bet, okay? Kuf becomes a Dalid, and Lamed becomes a Chaf. So
26.
26, exactly.
But that's Hashem's full name.
Exactly. Hence the half a shekel. Half. Okay. Kedama Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Eliezer. Miyom shachara Beit Hamikdash. Dayo la'olam sheishtamesh b'shtei otiyot. K'me'achar she'en olam malei. En rayu she'yikra Hashem ela al olam malei. K'mo shanu v'zuchran avracha. B'yom asot Hashem Elohim. Shem malei al olam malei. שלא היה עדיין בעבודה זרה בעולם שהעיקר בשם הוויה ומורה אמיתות והוויה השם הוויה מורה אמיתות והוויה is only okay, so he says מזה הטעם אין נקרא השם ככבוד אלא בכינויו. Okay, so basically he's saying is that Machatzit shekel represents only half, and Moshe had a difficulty with it because he says, I understand, if I go into Eretz Yisrael, what's going to happen? The world is perfect, it's complete, and your name is complete. So why are you only doing half a shekel? So he says half a shekel according to the Shach. The Shach in Atbash, he says that the shekel is not corresponding to 26, which is the full name of Hashem. But because Moshe won't be going into Eretz Yisrael, right? So it's only half, right? It's only half complete, and therefore what? We can't use Hashem's full name, and we can't use it's not. That's why Hashem tells us it's only half a shekel. Ela b'chinuyo. לפי שעשו אסור העגל, אז זה אמר שיתנו מחצית השקל, עד כמה שנה. V'zeh neged ha'erev rav. How is this machatzita shekel? How is this Moshe difficulty with the half a shekel correspond to the erev rav? Shasu ha'egel ve'aviu avodah zarah b'Yisrael. Kedita b'shem kedita sham b'perek daled avodah zarah. V'defalchu Yisrael ha'egel gali Adar tayu denichalu b'avodah zarah. Once the Jewish people worshipped, once they started doing avodah zarah, they showed that idolatry was acceptable. In other words, a half a shekel indicates that the world and Hashem's name would remain in a state of not being complete, since He would not be merit to lead the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael and to build an everlasting Beit HaMikdash. Hence, what happens? The half a shekel corresponds to the acceptance of the Erev Rav, which was basically causes the state of incompleteness. So now we have, what did we just do? Now that's why we have. That's the Nechoshet. That's why, according to if we look at now, we have Nechoshet, which is Ner, Chodesh, Shkalim, Tireh. Right? Ner, Chodesh, Shkalim, we just did. Explain, you will see, which is the following by our Parshat, which it says, Tetzaveh. Klomar, Kilo Iskar Shem Moshe de Parsha Zo, Lohorot Lanu Sheme'elu Shloshet Dvarim, Yadam Moshe, Sheyitziat Nishmato Tiyeh B'chutz La'aretz, V'yene'ela Me'ein Kol
That's what the
Chai.
tirah is?
Right, Tireh is, you're going to see.
From these three things.
These three things, right? Nechoshet, Ner, Chodesh, Shkalim, Tireh, and then it says, Batat Tetzaveh.
So the ner was connected
The
the menorah. That was hard for him to understand why only he needed to destroy seven and not all of them.
70, right? Exactly. Chodesh is because he doesn't understand. He said.
The moon only should be going bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
Hashem should get bigger and bigger.
Right, and he says, wait a minute, I don't get it. If I don't understand why I'm looking at why is it only getting bigger and bigger and smaller and smaller, that doesn't make sense. He said, well,
And that was connected shlach na b'atishlach.
Right.
And then Erev Rav kinem chatzit shekel because
He says it's because what happened with the Erev Rav, Moshe accepted the Erev Rav into Bnei Israel and accepted them into coming in. And what happened? By starting to serve the Egel Azav, which is the next week's Parsha, Hashem it says, you started to serve Bnei Israel. The Erev Rav is the one who basically was responsible for Bnei Israel to perform perform the Chet HaEgel. And since they, by what he says here is it says in the Gemara, he quotes the Gemara, he says is by Bnei Israel starting to serve Avodah Zarah, they showed their willingness and they showed their real interest that they were accepted. It was acceptable to them to serve Avodah Zarah. Because if they wouldn't, had the Erev Nav.
But how is it machatzit shekel?
Machatzit shekel is because what happens is by them serving Chet HaEgel, it says here. What it says here. As long as there's avodah zarah around the world, what happens? The world is not complete.
Hashem's not complete.
It's not complete, and therefore
So it's a chetzi shekel.
It's never complete. So why do we only not?
And so Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand the chetzi shekel because he was the one that bring the Erev Rav, and they were the one that started the avodah zarah.
Right, and what happened? And what happened? We should have said, what? The world should be complete. Moshe is like, if I come into Eretz Yisrael, what happens? The world's complete. He says, no. Hashem says, no. You don't get it. The world is not complete because what did you do? You allowed the Erev Rav to come in. Once you let the Erev Rav come in, they're going to influence. They've influenced Bnei Israel to do what? The Chet HaEgel. And the Chet HaEgel, once there's idolatry in the world, we can't serve Hashem properly. Those are the three things. Nechoshet, and that's why he says Nechoshet is the last word of last week's parsha. Tetzaveh doesn't appear. Moshe's name doesn't appear here, and then what happens next week? Right. So he says you're going to see these three things: Ner, Chodesh, Shkalim, Taf is Tireh. You'll see through those three things. Those three things are the representative of why you will see, why you won't merit. You'll understand. Tireh meaning you'll see and you'll understand that those three things are those in themselves are the corresponding to the three things that you performed, the sins that you went through that caused that basically caused you not to come into Eretz Yisrael. So those three things not only represent the sins, but they also represent the reasons as to why you couldn't go into Eretz. You won't be going to Eretz Yisrael. I'm stopping here for a reason because the other one, the next part gets a little more difficult. And we'll go to another gush in a few minutes.
Is it punishment
Yeah.
to Moshe or Metzias?
I don't know if it was like. I think it was more like.
Like he's punished because whatever he questioned God.
Yeah, right.
Or like it's just a Metzias, like you just can't go in.
It seems a little bit like a punishment.
Yeah, it's,
And that
the
seems
way I
also
read
like a
it.
Metzias, like
Right.
you can't be
Because
there.
those are the reasons why he didn't come into Eretz Yisrael. It's a punishment, no?
Right. it seems to me like a little bit of a punishment.
Yeah,
And
it
then-
reminds me, so that Gemara there, actually, on the same sugya,
Shaw, right?
Menachos, I just happened to learn it, that's why it's.
Where's Drush Aleph?
We just finished Rosh Aleph for the first
It
round.
talks
Just finished Drush
how
Aleph.
he also goes to see Rebbe Kiva teach,
Right,
um,
yeah, famous.
and he said, oh, Zuskar, and Rebbe Kiva gets punished, and he's the great Rebbe Kiva. And I
Right.
think,
You
was
want
it like the,
you want different Chaim or anything?
I don't know if it was the Shla or somebody, I saw an article or wrote it in.
Came here after
that-
dinner today.
That
Me too.
Rebbe Kiva, and I could be Moshe also, got such a high level of like
You don't come for the
Adam Kodem Ached almost, or
Yep.
whatever it is, that like he was judged on a
From Qatar,
completely
we had
different
chicken stuff and
plane than everybody else.
same.
So like even the
Shows that
smallest
you don't
little
come here for the
mistake,
food.
you could have the worst
Also
punishment
for
because
Stalin.
Right. Hashem always judges us.
so like
Yeah.
beyond
Right.
yourself
human.
and I sit all day by
Such an
myself.
angel.
So like
That's a
once a
standard
week,
question, it's a
the
standard
people
question,
hang
how
out.
could it be that Moshe said, how could it be that Moshe says to Hashem, just send whoever you want, like Shlach now, we have to Shlach, it's such a chutzpah they can have.
Huh?
Is to be
It's the main
humble.
thing,
Right?
huh?
Yeah.
And his
Chabura.
Hashem says,
No,
no.
last time, remember.
But again, Rebbe Kiva and Moshe are
Everyone's
very
gonna get their.
linked,
Right.
I think.
What?
Last time we were talking about that, everybody's
said,
gonna be.
you
you're
wanna
right.
be alone.
Yeah, right, yeah,
Or no, 2 more minutes. We just finished shooting.
Good.
Is it okay?
yeah.
Shkoyach.
Let's do it, huh?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, it's good Torah.
Such.
Very unique. I've never seen it.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh.
I haven't been here in a couple of weeks.
Huh? Couple.
Yeah, we missed you, Michal.
Yeah, I
No,
haven't
you
been here in a few
couple
months,
weeks.
but I didn't get that.
We haven't been here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I did that.
Why didn't you get that?
I've been here in months.
Oh,
That's true.
that's true too. That seems for everyone.
But you feel like you never left.
That's true. Always.
Can we get some more food and then I'll leave.
I'm also don't have a
Yeah, we'll get you. We'll get you. You smoke.
Charles away?
Yeah.
Charles is away.
Gotcha.
Like I said earlier,
Finish it up.
as I said earlier, I apologize, I didn't get a chance really to prepare as much as I wanted to.
Who's giving this shoot tomorrow? Or starting not tomorrow, Saturday.
Orenstein.
I don't know, I don't live here. As I
Dominic
said.
Orenstein. Our Mancunian rabbi.
Shkoyach that Charles still has it going.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so we're gonna do Drush Dollar in a
No,
minute.
shops.
I love your patch.
Zera Shimshon.
I'm looking for the other one that says.
Yeah, it was
Organic from the farm.
Sorry.
I ran trying to get it.
Maybe I hope I chose well. Sort of mix
I have
of
more.
things.
Yeah?
How much?
I'm looking for it. If you don't- Alright, so what you, well, Drush Dollar is a little shorter. Oh, there's pickles?
Uh-huh.
Wow. It's not on, right? It's not on.
I'm gonna go. Oh man. Okay, we're on now.
Right. So now we're gonna do Drush Dollar. There is a interesting debate. This Drush is more.
Which Drush you said, Dalet?
Dalet. So Drush Dalet is, it goes into, the Zera Shimshon is gonna go into why there's a machloket as to, a part of the walls of the Beit HaMikdash.
Quick question before we move on to that.
Go for it.
The Rishi Tebos of Nechoshes in the previous
Yeah.
Drush, is that the Zera Shimshon's Chiddush, or does he have a Makor?
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Any comment?
Okay, I didn't see it inside.
You will see. No?
I think it was his own idea.
According to this, it's his own idea.
Yeah, it would have quoted something.
Yeah, he would have
He
quoted
would
it.
have, for sure. He always
Flip it
does.
around.
Yeah. Oh, flip it around? Oh, it's
Yeah,
not.
the
He's
camera's
big
on.
enough to come up with his own.
Camera's still on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good question. I think it's his own
Yeah,
chiddush.
which dress you at then?
4. Dollar.
Dalet.
Okay. So now,
And we're live and everything.
we're live on everything. So this is the second Torah of the night.
What?
Josh Dalet.
The Gemara in Baba Batra, Perik Hey, or Daf Ein Hey, says, V'samti kadkod shimshotayich. It says, if
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm Haaretz. I'm
He hasn't
hearing
even started yet.
all this stuff with the kotkod, shager, like in the army. What does this kotkod
Kodkod
mean?
means, shager means to release.
Yeah, but kotkod, what's that?
Kodkod means is like the point. In other words, you're telling point one to point A to point B. Kodkod is like the central command. Means like that's that's like the person at the chamal. You say kodkod to whatever.
Ah,
In other words, the kodkod is the main person. He's the command person.
all right.
So now, interestingly, kadkod here. That's why you probably did. But kodkod,
That's why I asked you.
Right, kodkod is spelled with a kof, not a kaf.
Isn't that connected to the bracha with Yosef Asadik?
Nazir, right, kodkod lecha, right, Nazir
Nazir
lecha,
lecha,
right, you're right, correct. So it says here, Baba Bakr Perak Hay says, "V'samti kadkod shimshotayich, chad amar d'shoam, chad amar d'yashveh." This week's parsha, what do we know about the avnei avanim of
The 12 diamonds.
the 12
stones.
12 stones.
12 tribes.
Stones of right. And one of them is Shoam, and one of them is Yashveh. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Chad Amar de Shoam. One of them says, Samti Kadkod Shimshotayich. I will make your walls out of Kadkod. One opinion says that Kadkod means
Shimshotayich is wall?
walls. Shimshotayich are walls, right. Okay? One of them says, it's in Yishayahu. It says, one says that the Kadkod means stones of Shoam, and one of them says it's the stones of Yashveh. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Lehevi Kedin Uchedin. Let us be like both. Means that we'll make the walls will be made both of Yashveh and Shoam. Ad Kam Shano. That's the Gemara. Tarich Iyun. Zera Shimshon in typical fashion says, I need to understand. Lama Davka Yuha Chomot Me'elu Ashnei Avanim Shoam v'Yashveh.
We don't even know how they look. You know how they look?
Right. I don't
You ever
know.
saw one?
He said, in fact, even in the English, in the art school, usually they tell you like the name in English. It says here Shoam and Yashveh. They don't tell you.
You don't know.
The stones or the walls of the breastplate?
The stones themselves are Shoam and Yashveh.
Okay.
But the stone, what Yeshayahu was telling you about when he says the Samti Kadkod Shimshotayich, he's talking about the walls of the Beit HaMikdash.
Right, but they weren't.
Made out of stone, but that's what he said. That's what I don't know if they actually weren't made out of that, but he says this. Zera Shimshon says, I don't get it. I don't get it. So what does he say? V'yesh lomar. This is such a beautiful Torah. It's great. Shebe'elu avanim haya katuv behem ba'avnei hachoshen shmot Yosef u'Binyamin. So if you look in the Midrash in Shmot Rabbah, it says that these two stones, that the names of Yosef and Binyamin were inscribed on the Choshen, on these two, the Shoam and the Yashveh.
Which one is what?
What?
Binyamin is Yashveh.
I believe so, yes. You're right. Correct. I believe so. We're going to get to why in a second. The Chatuv b'Sefer Shiltei Giborim. The Sefer Shiltei Giborim, which is it's a sefer written many, many years ago. He says here by a work by Rav Avram Partolioni. Basically about the Beit HaMikdash and the different keli. He says like this: Shashoam yo'il lizchira v'la'inayim v'hu tov leha'ashir v'hu melamed l'shon ha'adam la'alitz u'daber b'chokhmah la'avin ha'chidot ha'neramot v'kimat yavi et ha'adam lidei nevuah. Okay, so he says is what happens with what's unique about the Shoam. This is not me saying this is not the Zera Shimshon. He's quoting the Shiltei Giborim, and he says
Stone has a skula.
the stone has a skula of what to become wealthy.
The lady in the old city, she has all these different stones. She has everyone has different skula.
Really? So he says here, look.
She makes jewelry.
Yeah, right. So he says what he says. So he says here, look. So he says here, look. The Shoam says is it's good for memory. It's good for your eyes. It's good to be wealthy. It also teaches a person to what? To la'alitz l'daber chokhmah, to speak with the proper tongue, to speak nicely, and to speak with chokhmah.
We better get one of those yashbes.
Who is that? Almost to bring us to Nevuah. Who had all of those? So
You said it was Binyamin though.
No, but Yosef. No, the Shoam is Yosef. Yashbe, we said is Binyamin. Okay, so he said, "V'nitna Evan Zol Yosef mipnei shaya lo inayim tovot," as it says, "Ben porata Yosef, ben porata le'ayim." Right? Vayalo zchira, as it says, what? Vayizkor Yosef. ומפני שהיה חכם בעל הלצה בפתרון החלום ונצנצה בו רוח הקודש כי דכתב אחרי הודיע אלוהים והיה איש מצליח עד כאן לשונו. The Shiltei Giborim said basically, Shiltei Giborim is quoting, the Zera Shimshon is quoting the Shiltei Giborim, who's saying basically that the Evan of Shoam corresponds to Yosef HaTzadik, whose name was written on that stone specifically, because it has he says here, the Shoam is beneficial for memory, wealth, allows a person to speak eloquently with a lot of chokmah, and allows us to understand.
Same letters as Moshe though.
What?
Shoam is the same letters as Moshe.
That's interesting. That didn't think about that. That's very good. Right? Okay, that's what the Shiltei Giborim says. Based on this, we can understand what? That why will the wall of Yerushalayim be made with Shoam? Lachen kidei l'remos shalati lavo u'malah tzdeat Hashem v'atzlacha rabah v'uzchira tova yachomot b'Shoam. That's why it says what happens if you look at the psukim, the right after. What does it say? That in the future the land will be filled with what? Deah. That's knowledge. Similar to the Shoam, which is what? Allows you to have Deah. Right? Hatzlacha will have great success and good memory. Why?
Amen.
So that's what happens. So he says is that corresponding to the Shoam, that's why we have the Shoam. Now we have to explain what? The Yashveh. Okay, we said already the Yashveh is going to be what? Binyamin. So now he says, Manda Amar Yashveh. Now we have to understand the person who says the Yashveh in Baba Batra, he says, Hainu Masha Katav Arav Aniskar Le'el. If you look at the Shiltei Giborim again, Shayashveh Sgulato Lishmor Adam Shelo Yitnu Asamim Hamimitim. The benefit of the Yashveh stone is that it protects a person from being given deadly poisons, and when he carries it, will not drown. V'nitana Binyamin Yiskor Lo Zchuti Mo. He says, what is Zchuti Mo? Now that's already a very bold statement. He says, why is it going to protect the person from not drowning? What happened to Binyamin? What do we know about Binyamin?
It doesn't say in Hebrew about this drowning thing.
What does it say here? It says, it doesn't say that. Okay. It says about, because if you read the rest of the...
English.
Right, in English, because the Hebrew doesn't complete the sentence of what it says in the Shiltei Giborim. That's why. But if you look, anyway, so he says, what happened, and it says, Binyamin will remember what happened to him with his mother. What happened to Binyamin with his mother? She died at childbirth. Exactly. It says here, she for she gave birth to him when she was still alive, obviously. But what? Well, she passed away as soon as she started giving birth. Right? So obviously she started she was alive when the birth started, and when she died, by the time it was over. But what? She didn't die, she didn't cause any trouble to him. Right? So you say, what? Look, it says what does it say? So therefore we could see already that what? The stone that protects one from death is thus fitting for Binyamin. Why is just like the Yashveh, which protects what? What does the Yashveh do? It protects people from dying.
Yeah.
Similar to Binyamin.
Beit HaMikdash.
Right, well, exactly.
It's kapara.
Right, look what it says. Beit HaMikdash nivna b'chalko shel Binyamin. Lefi shekol hashvatim hayu b'mechirato shel Yosef chutz Binyamin. Who's the only shevet that wasn't part of the selling of
Binyamin? Because he wasn't born yet, or he just wasn't there.
He wasn't there. He wasn't there because he was still far.
But he was born already.
Yeah, but he was too young, so he was back. So it says, if the Beit HaMikdash.
No, he wasn't born yet.
He was.
Why?
Yosef was 17.
No, but
Binyamin was
Binyamin.
only a few years younger.
Yeah,
He wasn't there, no.
I don't think he was
wasn't
there.
there.
I don't think he wasn't there. Right, because he's probably too young.
Yeah, right, he was. Because afterwards, Yosef wants to see his beloved brother.
Right. So go through the whole life.
Right, so he says,
He met him,
Beit
yeah, he
HaMikdash,
grew up
right? And now he says, what happens if we would have built the Beit HaMikdash in one of the other chalkot, not in Binyamin? ילכו להתפלל שם שירחם הקדוש ברוך הוא עליהם. לא היו נענים, כמו שהם לא רצו לרחם על יוסף אחיהם. You would have said, what would have happened?
You want Hashem to answer you? You better have Rahmanis.
Right, you didn't have Rahmanut on your own brother.
You better have Rahmanis.
You want to have Rahmanut? You want Hashem to have Rahmanut on you? וזה שאבנו של בנימין על ישפה. And that's why Binyamin's stone was the ישפה. במשמע יש פה. He has a mouth. לפי שבנימין דווקא יש לו פה להתפלל על הקדוש ברוך הוא. שירחם על ישראל.
יש פה.
מה שאין כן שאר השבטים. He says here, therefore, Binyamin is the Yashveh. We all know the Yashveh, like you said, Yashveh is Binyamin. But we said Yashveh is Yesh Peh. He has a nice mouth. Because Binyamin is the only one.
Well, you could daven.
You can daven.
Only by him you could daven.
Right, why? Because everyone else.
Because he had Rahmanis, because he wasn't there.
He wasn't there to
He wasn't
happen.
there.
Right? It would be chutzpahdik to ask Hashem for Rahmanut in one of the other chalaki of other shvatim.
When they didn't have Rahmanis on
But
him.
part of the base which is in Yehuda.
So that's being Tetzaveh Shachim, but right, the main part of the Beit HaMikdash was in Binyamin.
Oh, but the Kodesh Kodashim, the main thing is the...
Right. So now, let's go to the last part here. So he says, now explains, now He explained the two views. Now we have to explain why Hashem accepts both the views. HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar leheaven kedin uchedin. What happens in the Gemara? The Gemara says, Hashem says, let it be like both. Like one and like the other. Sharei Shnei.
What does that mean? Be.
Look, the Gemara at the beginning of this Torah, it says here, Baba Batra, it says, Chad amar d'shoam, v'chad amar d'yashveh.
For the Beit HaMikdash in the future.
Right, yeah.
It's talking about the third Beit HaMikdash.
I don't think they're talking about the Beis Hamikdash. I think they're just talking about like no, it's just
Yerushalayim.
just talking about Yerushalayim. The general like the city walls, but not
the city
the
walls.
not
Okay.
the Beis Hamikdash.
Okay, the wall. I'm sorry, you're right. The walls.
I'm not a Baki Nishai, but I think that's the
Yeah, there's no gap.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Let's see here. Let me just see here. The walls.
It says the wall surrounding the space of Mikdash.
It does say the walls surrounding the Beit HaMikdash. You're right. Okay, fine. Okay, so now we have to understand why does Hashem say I want it to be like both, right? We can understand that there's machloket. We understand, right? We got the one is Yashveh and one is Shoam. We understand that Shoam represents Yosef HaTzadik and Yashveh represents Binyamin. Now we have to understand why why Hashem says that we should be like both. Sharei Shneim b'nei Rachel, right? Both of them were who? Children of Rachel. Rachel here, Rachel is the one who, what do we know about?
She doesn't.
There's no nechama. There's no nechama for her. She doesn't want to get consoled. Right? Why? Why? Because the children are still in.
Kienenu.
Right? So what does he say here? Katuv omer. Oniyasar ala nechama.
Rachel mavakal banea.
Right.
B'ma'it nachem ki enenu.
Right? And then it says the verse is addressed to Rachel, the one that cannot be consoled. She can't be consoled. It is not that. Therefore, it says, "V'samti kadkol kigeneged shnei banayich." It's corresponding to your two sons. In other words, Hashem is consoling Rachel, saying that when we will gather Bnei Israel to rebuild Yerushalayim, He will build its walls both like Binyamin and like Yosef to represent your two sons. Represent your two sons, the two types of stones.
Because you don't give up to daven for us.
Man, she doesn't give up. Now we have another question, right? What's the word? Someone here asked a question. Why do we call the wall Shimshotayich? Right? Someone just asked.
Sounds like sun.
Right, exactly.
Sounds like shemesh.
Like shemesh, right? Exactly. So he says, look. He says here, "Mipnei shekeshmo she'ashemesh hakol imechim al oro, kach yelchu goyim laor shel chomotach sheyu kmo shemesh." Right? So he says is.
Oh, I guess it's very far from now.
So what did he say here? He says,
We'll have to wait another 2,000 years.
He says here, what did he say? Just as everyone walks in the light of the sun, so too, when Hashem tells Rachel that the nations, the Amim, will walk in the light of your walls that are bright as the sun. In the time of Mashiach, Hashem will make a sukkah for those who are the tzaddikim. Osim los zacha. If you merit to see and you become one of the tzaddikim, what happens? Osim lo sukkah. You'll make an actual sukkah. Lo zacha. Osim lo tzalzel.
What's that?
Like an awning, like a pergola, like a. You get to be says your tzalzel. He says we'll make a roof without walls. A shade. You get to see the shade, but you won't get to enjoy the sun, right? What happens when I'm in the shade? It's a little cooler, but what happens when I'm in the sun? I enjoy it, like a mamash.
Why? But in the sukkah, you don't see none of the sun?
No, you're protected, right? The sukkah is protected.
No, but the sukkah is a schach on top of you, covering you. What, the tziltzal, what's the difference between, what is the tziltzal?
Tziltzal, he says here, is...
It's like not a kosher sukkah.
Right, it's a mere shade. That is a roof without walls.
It's not as nice as the Livia.
Right.
We're gonna get this. You're
It's
gonna
one
see it's like
step below.
lo zacha. It's gonna be this.
Right, lo zacha osim lo kameh. If you're not even married to that, you'll have it some sort of kameh. Right, lo zacha.
What's anak?
Nashar porsim. What?
What's anak?
Oh, sorry. Lo zacha osim lo anak. He's not even worried that he'll make a necklace. Just a necklace.
They give him a necklace.
Necklace, but now if you don't zacha that, you'll just as kameh. In other words, it's smaller pieces of. Like the schut. In other words, what you're not gonna really enjoy a shar, and for the remainder of its hide, porso al chomot Yerushalayim, he will spread out the walls of Yerushalayim. V'zivo holech misof haolam v'ad sofo, and splendor will shine from the end of the world to the other. Shemar v'achul goyim
What's
l'orech.
this? You have to go do iyun on this.
Yeah, so he says here. Thus, the verse refers to the walls of Yerushalayim as suns to allude that the shining hide of the Diatan that will spread upon them, meaning that if you merit, right? Oh, sorry, I skipped the part of the word. That's why it didn't make sense. So he says here, Kedamim Hatam. So, Atira Baruch Lasot Sukkah Tzadikim Me Orosh Leviathan.
Isbei.
Right. So he says here, when you make In the future, Hashem will make a sukkah for the tzaddikim from the hide, that is from the skin of the Leviathan. If you really are zocheh, you'll see the sukkah.
What is this Leviathan? What are you excited about sitting in the skin of a Leviathan?
No, but you're sitting in that. It's not this. But what?
What are you excited? What do you care about the skin of a Leviathan? I don't understand this midrash. What, a Jew is excited to sit in the skin of a Leviathan? This big.
No, but he's going to sit in the. He's going to sit in the
It
sukkah.
said that.
Hashem.
What's this
Sukkah
thing though?
Hashem.
But what's this thing, the Leviathan? The whole world's waiting to sit in the skin of a Leviathan? That's the type of a Jew to wait thousands of years of gullahs to sit in the skin of a whale? Mazeh.
I say that every second.
What is that though? But what is it? What does it mean?
I think he's saying what he says here. Look, the way he summarizes it. Hashem says,
You're asking a very good question.
Hashem says, I accept both views, both Yosef and Binyamin. He says is when he says when we build Yerushalayim, he will build the walls out of two types of stones that represent their two sons. And when he will build the walls which are made out of Shimtotayich, which can also mean your son, meaning your son, as in allusion to the fact that he will spread out the shining hide of the sun over the wall, meaning that the sun is kind of like the Orosh of the Leviathan will in some way protect over the walls. That means, sorry, the Orosh of the Leviathan will protect over the walls, so that the sun will shine on those people who merit, and those who it will not shine on those people who are
You
not.
guys are fishermen. Tell us, what is this thing?
I'll let you know when I catch
We're
it.
waiting thousands of years to sit in the sukkah of a whale.
Good questioning.
You guys are fishermen. Tell us, maybe you know something.
Oh no, you know what it is? The Rosh Leviathan is protected. Right? What happens with the sun? When the sun is so bright, you're not going to be able to sit out there for so long. So the Rosh Leviathan is the sukkah. If you merit, you're going to sit into something that's beautiful. The sukkah Leviathan is something protected. The sukkah is protected. Right?
Doesn't he also say he's going to play with the Leviathan, like whatever that means? Right? Play with him. It's a chaykuto.
Right. So I guess. Like,
And then he's going to eat them.
Right, no,
Right,
we're
you're
going
gonna
to eat
feast
them.
the
We're
Leviathan.
going to eat them. Right.
So
we're
first
gonna
going to play them, then
So
we're
that's
gonna
the
have
Jewish Daled.
whatever that means.
Okay. Shkoach, hold on a second, we're going to stop. And then maybe we'll get a third one. Maybe?
Shkoyach.
I'm just gonna-
Go for it. We need to get hold of some chairs for the kollel that's coming, Chatzos. Does anyone know where they're usually kept? Because Charles messaged me something about a neighbor or something.
Why is there random vegetables here?
We get a visitor from the farms. He works the farms here,
Uh,
and he's bringing us
who's at the
organic.
He works in a farm.
Our friend Larry.
pre October 7th or post? Oh, you just started.
Oh, you did it? Good. Thank you.
Doesn't have a very strong smell. It's awesome.
Which farm?
I don't have a very sensitive smell.
A lot of people became farmers after October 7th.
He's like, no,
It's good when you have dinner at home and you come Yeshuot down. Give it over dinner.
Was that the song?
It looks like garlic.
It's good that Charles asked me yesterday, can I cover it for him today?
No, I normally tell you the same
No, usually talking on Sundays, like I'm not gonna be here already, so like prepare. Yesterday he says, I'm not ready, I'm not
How did
ready.
you get so good?
I learn Zera Shimshon every day anyway.
Anyway.
So I listen anyway.
Before you met Charles.
Yeah, before I met Charles, I learn anyway.
How did you
sure
meet
it's not
Charles?
green onion?
It's just through knowing.
You're gonna understand why it contains that, right? Because it looks like green onion.
Okay. This one is a little challenging.
What is that?
Oh, you finished?
Oh, you've been into the Zera Shimshon for years?
It's a very
I was about 6 months before I met Charles.
Do you have a story of Yeshua?
Azalea.
Everyone has a story of Yeshua.
Azalea.
Smell like.
Oh, man.
Azalea.
Let me just see if we can do this one. Hold on.
Leviathan. Gematria.
Is this entirely edible?
Was it?
Entirely
Adat
edible?
Aza.
באמת?
I know, that's the
שם
problem.
צדיקים יושבים.
לא.
Purim Kotzah.
באמת?
496.
באמת? מה, הבאת את זה לפני זה?
I can't talk now.
Yeah,
Wow.
Purim Torah.
למדתי
You know what he
שנים.
just said?
No, it's good.
He just said the Chayal that Orosh Leviathan is Gematria Ogdat Aza.
Well, I want to say good news, Yeshua, for my son who came to Zera Shimshon this Shabbat. He came back his first time, 48 hours since being in Kan Yunis, and the second time the whole Mechama. And literally by Chatzos he was back in Gaza, and he heard good news from through the army and Shabbat that he had contact with in Kan Yunis, that the terrorists he'd arrested, his unit arrested, many of them were from October the 7th. So that's very fulfilling for a unit. Unit Tisha B'Shmona, you can check
Did
it
he
out.
get
I
the
don't
deal with
care,
Elam? Sell the deal?
Excuse me?
My daughter
Anybody who
tried.
served,
The
My brother-in-law got
system
it.
crashed.
What
System
happened?
crashed.
What is it?
Allah was
served.
giving out students for people who are serving or served since October 7th.
Free ticket to
Free
you.
tickets to Europe. But it's over.
My
It's
brother-in-law got
Over
it.
So they
subscribed.
make a giveaway, like my friend was
Yes.
getting all
Okay,
ready.
Hashem's gonna have to pay on that.
Here.
Yeah, they give it, but does this have to live
That's the first one.
In Israel. 2 weeks ago.
We had a Yeshua, Baruch Hashem.
You got such a big one?
He was lighting the Zera Shimshon with
What kind of
Hashem.
fish is it?
Did you serve in the army?
Lied
Where is
He
it?
used his 48 hours.
Where was
To
it?
go learn the Zera Shimshon. He used his 48 hours to go to see a
How'd
rabbi.
you get it?
doesn't have.
To go to the mikveh.
Ah, it's not kosher.
Doesn't think.
יש להם זמן?
אני לא בטוח שזה ברכה
He spent an hour in the shower washing up the dirt from
מה
Gaza.
נראה לך? זה
And he'd already had a shower.
או זה שום.
Oh, it's an Abu
He had a
Nafta.
shower in the base, but to have a proper shower,
בצל ירוק, אבל...
it took an hour to get rid of all the
He
schmutz.
says it's an Abu
זה
Nafta.
נראה כמו שום.
אני חושב שזה בצל ירוק.
לא, זה לא בסדר.
When are we going to start?
לא יודע.
I'm trying to see if I can do this
No, no,
totally.
Which one?
There's only one other short one, which is bet. It's a little challenging.
העלים שלו פה,
Okay, but we're going to help on bet. Torah bet.
Torah bet.
זה...
2. Number 2, guys. Everyone needs to help out.
out. It's not as it's like a little bit more of like a Gemara cup one. So hopefully we'll be able to go through
זה
it.
באמצע מלחמה, לשאול...
Can we turn on the thing now?
או זה יהיה בעתיד.
זה
We're
קופון.
live. Go.
Okay.
זה קופון.
All right, we're gonna try to do one more.
Torah bet. The second Torah.
Torah bet. Okay, this one's a little bit more challenging, and I'm just saying that in advance. I tried to do it myself before. It's not so easy. So if anyone wants to help out, okay. It says here, Vata, Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael v'yichru elach Hashem zach katit bet. Vata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael v'yichru elach Hashem zayit zach katit la'maor la'alot ner tamid. And Rashi says, katit הזיתים היה קוטש במכתשת ואינו טוחנן בריחה. In a במכתשת is like what they call it a
It's like
mortar
a stone. A
pestle.
big
Yeah, stone.
a stone goes over the
Right.
oil.
No,
The olives.
מכתשת ואינו טוחנן בריחה, but you don't do it with a big
So
thing.
what's a machtesh?
מכתשת is the the little thing. You
Little
just-
hand one?
Yeah, the little hand one. Yeah, mortar pestle they call it. Right, but not ground at the mill. Right, so that there's no sediment in the oil. The first drops, right, those are the first ones, right? Asheni is pasul menorah. Kasher im nachot. Shneimar katit lamaor v'lo katit lamnachot. That's what Rashi says. Okay, Rashi says that basically the first drops, right? There will be so that basically Rashi says that in katit means that it's the first drops. It should be pure. The first drops that come out of that when you're crushing it with the mortar and pestle, that this, it's like a stick with the bowl inside. You kind of mix it together, right? That is
God,
katit.
there's a lot of work to get that
Yeah,
done.
that's katit. But the second ones, the next group after that, that is Hashem Hasheni, the second oil, pasul menorah. It's pasul for the menorah, but it's kasher for the menachot. Kasher for any of the menachot offerings. Okay, that's what Rashi says. Now the Zera Shimshon tries to understand is now we have to look, and now it says Lukaman Gabei Menachot. Now if you look at the Menachot, now okay, Rashi just said what? Rashi just said that the first oil is kosher for the menorah, but not kosher for the Menachot. So what's the Zera Shimshon going to do? Let's look at the Menachot to understand and try to start comparing. Now if you look Gabei Menachot, Pirash Rashi al Pasuk V'Saron Solet Balu B'Shemen. Right? If you look in Pasuk Parak Kaftet Pasuk Mem, it says is Lo Ne'emar Katit L'Chova. Rashi says Lo Ne'emar Katit L'Chova El Lachshir L'Fi She'emar Katit L'Maor. For since it says by the menorah Katit L'Maor Yachol L'Salom Nachot Talmud Lomar Kan Katit Lamed L'Chatit Lam Mikasher Lo Ne'emar Katit L'Maor.
Well, why would we think that the good oil would be puzzle?
That's exactly what he's asking. He's asking. He's saying, "Is katit? Sorry, katit." So he says, "Like lo me'amar katit."
No, he's saying there by Benachot, it's not coming till you have to do katit.
Right.
But you should know that don't think it's not kosher if you use the best oil. Why would you think it's not kosher?
Because in
Maybe it only has to be only for the menorah.
right, exactly. Maybe that's what we would think, right? Because what did the Zera Shimshon just do? He takes the Rashi from one place, takes the Rashi from the other place. It says, what does Rashi say in both places? And understand what do we understand from the two different places? So the first place we said in this week's parsha, we said what? That katit, only the first oil is kosher for the menorah, and the second oil is kosher for the menachot, but not kosher for the menorah. In the second place, that is in menachot, it says what? That katit is not stated as a chiyuv, right? But rather you can use it. I mean, it's not a chiyuv like it is in the menorah, but you can use it if you want to, right? It
doesn't say katit lamnachot.
Right, it doesn't. But it says katit lamaor, not katit lamnachot. Exactly right. So that's exactly right. Talmud lamar kan katit lamet echtiv nami kasher. It's also kosher. It's also kosher. It means that the first katit means which is the first grinding is kosher for menachot, but it's not necessarily. It's not a chiyuv like it is with the menorah. Okay. Now it says, look, it says here, makshim. Who are these people that ask? He says that he says makshim. When he says makshim, ArtScroll says that it's the Mizrahi. That is the Pirush Mizrahi. He says the lo ketiv likra lo hey velo vav. Let the verse write the word. What are you saying here? Where the Gemara expounds based on the vav that the malacha, which should be forbidden to cholim. Okay. Let the verse write either hey. That is, why did the Torah not omit both letters? Okay, so he says here, since the word katit regarding the chatit is okay, that is the lo ketiv katit b'menachot, the lo ketiv lamaor b'menorah. Right, since the word basically the verse that write neither the hey nor the vav, he's basically saying is one or the other. That is, the Torah did not omit both letters, and we should arrive at the same conclusion. Meaning, what happens if you look at the maor by the menorah? Let's say we didn't say the word maor, right? Like katit lamaor is what it says in this week's parsha, right? Let's say we didn't write that word in menorah, right? Since we know,
just say shemen katit.
Shemen katit. We would have known lamaor.
Shemen katit.
We would have known lamaor. Why? Because we're talking about the menorah. What else are we talking about, right? So he says, since the word katit regarding the mincha teaches us only to ignore them, right? Why the Torah not omit both of these terms, katit by the menorah and Why does the Torah say katit in the menachot and maor in the menorah? We didn't have to say those. We would have been obvious, right? V'od demanit le'Rashi b'meilav hachei demikatit la'maor shashni kasher le'menachot. What is it? How did Rashi know that derived from the katit la'maor that the second oil is fit for menachot? Maybe we should say what? That also we do not require the mincha offering to be katit. But it's also true that the second oil by itself is also unfit. So that the first oil is mixed with the second one. So he says, how did Rashi derive from the word katit lamor that the second oil by itself is fit for use in the mincha offering? Okay, so now he's basically saying that Zera Shimshon's question are twofold. One is, why does it say katit? Why does it have to say maor when it's talking about the menorah? It's obvious. And why does it have to say katit when we're talking about the menachot? We don't need them. Those two words are not necessary. Because what? It would have been obvious. We would have gotten the same conclusion had those words not been mentioned. And he says, another question is, why? How did Rashi know that when it says katit lamaor, that it said that second oil is katit? When it says katit lamaor, how do we know that katit is kasher for the menachot? I mean, the second katit lamaor means that the first drops are only kasher for the maor. But what does that mean? That for the second drops are katit are kasher for the menachot. How did you get to that? How did Rashi get to that? That's what he's asking. Good question, right? Right? That's perhaps okay. So now he says like this. So first, according to the, it says here, V'yesh Lomar. So he says, let's look at the second answer first. So he says it's like this. V'yesh Lomar. We can start explaining it like this. The Fizeh, that if so, there will be two contradictory elements of logic here. Basically, he says that we have to use our brain in a different way than we usually do. He says, look, for once the Torah says, by the menorah it says katit lamaor, katit lamnachot, it would, if katit would not have been written regarding the menachot, לפי סברה הזאת צריך לומר שהחשוב, דהיינו השמן הראשון, פסול, וממילא בשמן האחרון צריך הגרוע, דהיינו השמן השני, right? So he says it like this. He says that we have to think illogically to understand. He's saying if katit had not been written regarding the mincha, we would have thought, what would we have thought? That katit is unfit for the menachot. As Rashi says that on the pasuk Isaron Solet, he says there, he says Firazet Tzarich Lomar, that we have to say is that the chashuv, that the superior type of oil is the first oil, but it's pasul for what? It's pasul for the mincha. Basically, saying is that what? We need the worst, the inferior type of oil. That is the second oil. There's no longer reason. What is he saying here? In other words, although the word katit teaches us that the first oil is fit for use in the mincha for the minachot,
it's very hard. It's very hard.
It's a very hard one. The need for this teaching clearly indicates that the first oil is not preferable to the second. Right. Hence, it's illogical to infer from the words katit lamor that the second is also fit for the menachot, only if it makes it the first. Basically saying is that it's the afuch al afuch. Basically saying the reason that the first oil is not preferable to the second oil with regard to minchot is that the reason that the second oil must be mixed with the first is thus two contradicting elements of logic. Basically saying is that the first, we would have thought that katit is only good for the ma'od, and we would have thought that what katit is not good for menachot. But he says katit yeh pasul. We would have thought not only that it's pasul, and therefore he says what? Therefore we have to say that the opposite is true. Hashem and Arishon, the first oil, is pasul for the mincha, and therefore mimela shel menachot. So we would think that we need the garua for the menachot. He says therefore no, that's not the truth. That's not what we would have thought that. But he says no, that's not what we would have thought. That's the word. Now he says
it's hard to think. You would think the garua you need for something for
right?
the mikdash.
You would have thought that. That's right. That's why he says
you wouldn't. Well, why would you think that you need the
right? Exactly. That's what he's saying. Is that you think that second and you think that the second one must be mixed with the first oil, and therefore we have to say that it's kilu afuch. That's why he says it's afuch. You would have thought that that's what he says. He starts with hayu b'chan shtei svarot afuchot. Right, since it says in the katit lamaor by the menorah, we would not have thought that what? That regard.
But why would you think it's pasul the menachot? That's the only.
That's what Rashi says.
Why would you think that?
It says Hashem Ashni pasulam menorah menachot. Right? Why would you have thought that it's pasul? Because if we know that the first is good for the menorah, what does by default mean? That it's only good for the menorah.
Right, meaning katit lamaor
Or
means
and only lamaor.
only lamaor.
Why would you think it's pasul by the menachot if you took it to the menachot?
Because it says katit lamaor. So
but it's
you
a
would
good
think
thing.
only for the menorah.
No, but
meaning there's two
in
different
other words, you
things
could
here.
only
There's
use it
first
for the
oil
menorah.
and then there's the second.
In other words, you
oil.
could only use it
Only
for
use it for the menorah. So why over there by menachos does it say katit? It's not to mechayev you have to use katit for menachos, because we already saw over by where it was talking about menorah that menorah is for katit and sheni you can use for menachos. So it's not saying you have to use katit because we know we can use sheni. It's saying it's okay to use katit. Why would I have thought it's not okay? Because it's katit lamaor and not lamenachos.
Ah, nice.
Right, that's what he said. That's first option. Let's say we use it for logic. That the second oil is unfit, like you said. Why would we think that second is good for the mincha? Why should we think that the second is good? Right? You just said it, right? If we say that like other reasons, that the second oil is unfit for minchot, since what? Since the first oil, the shemen katit lamaor, is not included. The shemen katit, the good stuff, is not included in the second one, right? It would emerge that the inferior second oil is not required for mincha offerings. And the first oil would certainly be acceptable. Accordingly, there should be no reason to say katit in menachot.
That's my logic.
Exactly.
Automatically it should be kosher.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And we cannot say that we need specific katit for the menachot offering. Because it was written regarding the menorah, it says ma'or. With the mashma, the lo
That's what you said.
Exactly what he said. Exactly. The pasuk comes to teach us that katit is ra'ui, is fit for both menachot. La'puke asvar shaya lanu shakatit yaya pasuk. Ksheyesh svar zo ba'al olam akochach lomar shashini kasher lamnachot. Mimela ima'ate asvar la'acheret. Thus we have discontinued the second reasoning. Lomar shagor pasuk v'ayin hashini. Basically, he's saying is like this. He's basically saying is that by saying that katit la ma'or, we would have come to the conclusion that what? That katit is only necessary for ma'or and not necessary for melachot, or not ra'ui for melachot. But because it says katit and melachot, we can learn that it's okay to use katit for melachot, but not necessarily. It's not chiyuv. He's basically making it's a very fine diuk. He's not making something that's not like one of these nice kiddushim like we learned in the previous two Torahs of the today. This is more of like a diuk, like a Gemara cup kind of thing. And that's what he says. Now he says, "V'ilo havi katit b'menachot v'lo b'lama'or." Let's say it said katit written in the menachot and not in ma'or. Haiti omer b'mekol sheken shaf menachot b'ini katit or avka kedetan b'perek chut menachot. Ma'im ha'menor she'en la'achila tu'nas she'en zaytzav menachot she'en la'achila. So you're basically saying is, let's say what would have happened had it said katit in menachot and not in the menorah, right? Because we have to basically, in order to understand the diuk, what we have to do, we say is, if we take out katit in the ma'or and we only have katit in menachot, what would we have said? That it's okay, we have to do it in menachot, but not in. That it would have been okay to have the second level katit in the menorah, right? Right. So he says here, the first therefore I have to say the more thinking the first oil required for the menorah and mincha and not for the mincha, since they may have led to one to infer that the first oil is unfit for the mincha oil. Therefore, the mincha, the verse about mincha offer, I have to say katit. It's just that indeed fit for use. Basically, he's saying is the reason why it says katit in both places. In the case of the menorah, katit is to teach us that only katit is relevant for menorah. Only katit means you can't use anything else. Only the first drops. And in the time, and why does it say katit in the menachot? To teach us that there, unlike with the menorah where it says katit and it says you have to use the first oils, there the katit is saying is you can use the katit, but you don't have to use the katit. That's what he's saying.
Ugh.
Wow, what all the brachas, guys.
Amen.
Beautiful Shabbos, it's Hanukkah, Sameach.
Purim Sameach.
Purim Godel Sameach.
Purim Gadol Sameach. And Purim Chatan.
Shovavim Tate.
You're gonna zoom in here, right?
I didn't wash yet. I didn't wash. Who washed?
We can
Wait, hold on.
start.
You had yain. You had what yain? You can answer.
I can answer.
Yeah.
We could all answer.
I had a whole suda, I just didn't eat bread. But
We need
okay.
6 who watched. Not too
No, we don't have to have. We have 10, 2, 4,
9.
6, 8, 9. We have 9.
No, you need 2 that ate bread and 1 that ate mazonos. You could do zimun.
Yeah, I had
But
to
to say Seamus.
No, you don't have to say shame. I can say shame.
No, but if we had 10, but 4 of us hadn't washed, we could still say Seamus.
Almost time.
You don't need that.
Next time.
For the third.